Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Grace. It is lovely to have you here. We are getting so close to the end of the year now, and I have had an interesting reading year. I've read much more than I normally would do, and I'm so grateful for that. I've read a lot of good books, but I've struggled to find favourites. I have a few, but not as many as I would like, especially given that I've read way more books than I normally would have done. I would have expected to find more that I absolutely loved. So I thought, as we head to the end of the year, it would be fun if I could ask you guys what your favourite books of the year have been, and then pick some of those out to read myself and see if they could be favourites for me too. So I asked over on my Instagram, which is where I usually ask this kind of thing, but I also asked here on YouTube, and I got a lot of varied responses. In terms of responses that I got multiple times, they were all books that I had already read, which really just says that clearly I found my people. We have similar reading taste. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, for example, was mentioned multiple times, and that was one of my favourite books of last year. But I wanted to go through and find books that were a little bit more out of my comfort zone, try and push myself to read some books that I might not have picked up otherwise. So I haven't gone for books that were already on my physical TBR that I planned to read. I know that Someone You Can Build a Nest In was mentioned, and I'm really excited for that one, and Last Night at the Telegraph Club, which I have owned for a while now and I do need to get to. I am very excited for that one, but I wanted to go for books that I probably wouldn't have picked out myself to see if using that external opinion might steer me in the right direction, because clearly I've not been able to pick what books would be my favourites for myself this year. So I split the rest of the books into two categories. I just did two twice. Two categories. One being books that I have at least heard of. I've not put them on my TBR, maybe because I wasn't sure if they'd be for me, or I'd heard things that weren't as great about those books. And then I also made a category of books that I just hadn't heard of before, that were totally new to me. And my plan for this video is to read a book from each of those categories, and hopefully I will love them as much as you clearly have. So now I will pass you to Grace in the future, who is about to pick out her first book. I think, oddly enough, I'm gonna start with the book that I just hadn't heard of before, because I'm kind of in the mood to read something a bit out of my comfort zone. So the book that I've gone for from this category is Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. This was pitched to me as a retelling of Little Women in the 80s, I think, maybe through to around the noughties. And I hate to say it, but I have not actually read the original Little Women. I have seen the Greta Gerwig movie, and I really do tend to enjoy kids' classics. Anne of Green Gables is one of my favourite books of all time, so I would like to read it at some point, although I have heard mixed things. Fun fact, my mum really doesn't like that book. She thinks it's very preachy. But I know that I like the general story and the characters involved from having seen the movie, which hopefully should be represented in here. I think that this is told from the perspective of Laurie's character, but of course they have a different name. It says it is set in a close-knit Italian-American neighborhood, and our main character, William, grew up in a very fraught family setting that seems to have been impacted by some kind of tragedy, but he meets the spirited Julia Padovano, and she brings him into the fold of her three other sisters. But darkness from his past keeps catching up to him, and he ends up turning to a different sister, Sylvie, the family's dreamer, who I'm assuming is meant to be this book's version of Jo. I'm intrigued to see how similar to the original narrative this will be and how much it will diverge. And I really don't read, I don't know if this even counts as contemporary, I guess it is still historical, but I don't read books without magic in that often, especially not literary ones. If I do tend to diverge that way, it's probably because I'm reading an Emily Henry or a silly little romance, and there is nothing wrong with a silly little romance, don't let anyone tell you so. But I am excited to be branching out a little bit with this one, so I'm gonna get started on that. It is meant to be a very rainy weekend this weekend, so I'm hoping I can just get cozy and get lots of reading done. So I will catch up with you when I am a ways into this one and let you know how I'm feeling. Man, it is a gloomy morning. I'm about 60 pages in to Hello Beautiful, which I know it doesn't sound like much. And I hate to be, what's the TikTok that's like, why are there so many words on this page? But why are there so many words on this page? It's a very small font and it goes right to the edge of the page. So it's taking me longer to read than expected just because I feel like there are more words crammed into here than the average book of this length. But I am enjoying the words. I am enjoying the writing style. It feels very easy to read, but at the same time, very insightful, and like we're really getting to know these characters in depth. It's interesting because to begin with, I feel like I was trying to figure out which sister was which in terms of the Little Women comparison, but about 40 pages in, I think, they actually name drop Little Women, and one of the sisters talks about how the four of them had talked about it before and tried to figure out which sister is which, and it's not a one-to-one ratio. The two older sisters feel like they're kind of a combination of Jo, and the younger sisters seem more like they switch back and forth between Amy and Meg, and when any one of them is sick, then they say, "I'm Beth today," which is, they're doing Beth so dirty. But I think that's interesting because it is from a character's perspective, so I don't know if that is a biased opinion, but it seems like it is not a one-to-one comparison between these characters and the characters from Little Women, which I think is probably the best way for me to look at it if I don't read this expecting it to be a full-on retelling, more just inspired by Little Women, and then I can see it more as its own thing. I think that will help me to enjoy this more. But so far, I am really enjoying it, and it's reminding me that I do like literary fiction. The few that I have read in the past, I have really enjoyed. Sometimes I think it can leave more room for experimentation when it comes to the basics of writing, like the writing itself and the character development. Sometimes when you read fantasy, there's so much going on that those things aren't always focused on as much. Not always. There are some gorgeously experimental fantasy books out there, but I think there can be a bit more room for that within literary fiction sometimes. These days I always find that my favourite books come out of reading totally out of my comfort zone, so clearly I just need to read a bit of everything. But tomorrow, Chris and I are gonna venture out into the rain and go to a little coffee shop. He has some work to do on a Dungeons & Dragons one-shot he's planning, and I am gonna carry on reading. I think I'm properly engaged now, so I'm hoping I can speed through it a little bit faster. So I'll see you when we get back. Hopefully not too drenched. Hello, it is quite a bit later. I'm in my cozy reading jumper. I have read about 100 more pages of Hello Beautiful, so I'm up to about 160-ish. I'm still, I was gonna say I'm still enjoying this, but I don't know if that's the right word. It's rough. They're all really going through it, and this is a gorgeously written exploration of character, of mental health, especially within this time period in the 1980s and how it is viewed back then. I thought initially it was going to be told just from the perspective of the main male character, who I guess is kind of like the Laurie figure, and it is partially, but it's also told from the perspectives of the two eldest sisters, and the similarities and differences between all of them are really interesting. They feel so complex. It is really so insightful, but it's also heavy. I feel just sad. And I'm not even halfway through, and I feel like a lot has happened, and I really can't figure out how this could get to a point where it's going to wrap up. Everything feels too devastating. But I objectively can tell that this is an incredibly well-written book. But I think maybe for the end of today or the start of tomorrow, I might mix up a little bit and start my other book, because I know I want to listen to that one on audiobook, and I can usually cope having two books on the go if one's physical and one's audio. And I know I'm gonna have just chores to do tomorrow, so it might be good to have this one on the go in the background. And this is the book from the category of books that I have heard of and thought about and wondered if I might want to read, but I've never properly put them on my TBR or solidly decided to get to them. And this one is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. I have never read a book by Alex E. Harrow, but I did read Six Deaths of the Saint about a month ago now, I think, and I did really enjoy that. I liked her writing style in it, and I liked the experimentation she took with that one. But that one is only about 30 or so pages. Can you hear the wind? There is a storm going on right now, and we are in the top flat in our flat block, and you can really hear it rattling things around. But that story is only about 30 or so pages, so I'm intrigued to see what a full novel by this author will be like. I have 10,000 Doors of January on my TBR, and I am excited to get to that one because it sounds more kind of portal fantasy-esque. I've heard some people describe it as one to read if you liked The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which I loved. But I've been less intrigued by Starling House. I know this is a gothic story of a manor house that used to belong to a reclusive author, but everyone in this town knows to leave this strange house and the last heir of this author, Arthur, who lives there, alone. And our main character, Opal, knows that she should leave it alone too, but when she is offered a job there that could maybe mean helping her brother to get out of this town in the middle of nowhere, she decides to take the offer, and the house ends up not being what she expected and begins to feel a bit like home. But when sinister forces come to take over this new home that she's found, her and Arthur have to work together to dig up some secrets and fight to keep Starling House for themselves. This definitely reminds me, vibe-wise, of The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi, which I read earlier this year and I did not expect to love as much as I did, but I had a great time with that book. I don't tend to go for gothic books. I'm a bit of a coward when it comes to what I read, but I do like dark vibes. I just don't like horror, so I'm hoping this one will be kind of spooky fun rather than actually scary. So I am intrigued by Alex E. Harrow's writing, and I'm hoping that the vibes in this one are just going to be really strong. The atmosphere is going to be enveloping. I think I'm feeling like I need a little bit of fantasy after dealing with this one. Some escapism to help me cope with the emotions in here because they feel very real. So I will catch up with you tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have listened to a bit of Starling House by then. Maybe I'll have read a little bit more of this one too, and I will give you an update on my thoughts.
He can walk over. He can, let me move Rabbit out of the way so you can get 3, 2, 1, falling swing.
Sweeping cut.
Oh, finally.
Hello, I owe you a reading update. It is the next evening. Chris and I have had a bit of a cozy day, so I haven't gotten quite as much reading done as I'd hoped, but I am about 3 hours into the audiobook of Starling House. And it is not quite what I expected. It's not quite as lyrical and I guess kind of nonsensical as I expected. It's a little more grounded, but I'm not mad about that. I think it is really well written. There's a little bit more snark to it than I thought there would be. Our main character is very self-sufficient. They've grown up pretty poor and had to fend for themselves and their brother, so they have this quite sarcastic voice. And the perspectives that it's written from are really interesting. It's written in first person from that main character's perspective, but also sometimes in third person from the perspective of the heir who owns Starling House. And then there are these footnotes that seem to be written in another perspective that we don't currently know who that is at the moment, so there's a bit of a mystery there. I'm enjoying those multimedia parts to it. Sometimes it'll explain like a Wikipedia article or a bibliographical list of history books or something, and it's making me think that I would maybe enjoy having the physical copy to read alongside this. I did request it at the library, but it is alas too popular and has not got here in time. But I think if I enjoy this enough, I would like to get my own copy and then kind of look through and see how all of that is formatted. I think it is done well on the audiobook though, and I'm enjoying the narration of it. I think I also maybe needed a bit of a break from Hello Beautiful. It is so gorgeously written, but it's also just depressing. And I think that combined with how dark it is getting so early at the moment was just making me feel a bit morose. That is one thing about literary fiction that puts me off. There are so many just sad books in that genre, and I don't do well with just heavy, densely sad stories. I like there to be a balance of hope in there, and maybe there will be later down the line. I'm still not even halfway through Hello Beautiful, but somehow Starling House is feeling a little bit more hopeful, even though it is a gothic story and there are a lot of sad things coming up. It's also taking a look at industrialization and capitalism and the way that big corporations really just reinforce inequality that there already is in a community. There is a power company in the town that this story is set in, and they are clearly having an awful effect on the land, and they're meaning that the water here is full of chemicals and undrinkable, and we're finding out the awful ways that they've treated marginalized groups throughout the years, while of course the owner of this company lives in a giant 7-bedroom house and is barely even there because he's on holiday all the time. And I honestly really didn't expect for this to have any kind of commentary in it at all. I was thinking it would be mostly just vibes, so I'm really appreciating having that depth there. And I think if anything it's adding to the vibes, because whatever corruption is here feels like it's tied to that corruption of the land and its people that comes from this giant power company. So I'm enjoying it. I'm intrigued to see where the general mystery of this spooky house will go, along with that social commentary that's going on as well. I am at work tomorrow, so I might not get as much reading done, but hopefully I can listen to my audiobook on the way to work and back and get some reading done in the evening, and then I might give you another update the day after that because I have a day off then. So I will see you when I have hopefully read a good chunk more. I'm gonna go from like here, I think.
There you go. Now hold it. Hold this chunk here. I'm coming back around.
Cute. He's
We have a few guys in each show.
terrified.
This is the best one we have.
The angel on our tree.
The angel on our tree, my love, General Grievous. See the embrace on the thing.
He brings me joy.
We've got one more heart through to the bottom.
Did it. Bow, down, down. Hello. It is not a couple days later, it is Friday now. I don't remember if I've been saying the days of the week in this video. I meant to catch up with you on Tuesday. It is now Friday. It was a busier week than I expected, but I have been solidly reading, and I finished this morning. I finished reading Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. This was pretty devastating. I think I cried solidly for the last 50-ish pages of this. It was very well written. The character study in here, this is basically several character studies rolled into one of these 4 sisters who are incredibly close in many ways, and then this man who comes into their lives. We follow them from a very young age and see how they hurt each other, how they mend each other, how they grow together and apart. It is so clever in the way that it depicts complicated relationships and flawed people, and how a choice can be devastating for one person but seem like the only option for another. It was very interesting, and if you like sad literary books, I would highly recommend this. Was it necessarily for me? I don't know. I'm glad that I read it. I still think it was an incredible book. I wouldn't say that this was a favourite for me, just because I don't think books where I feel sad for the majority of reading them, I will ever consider a favourite for me. I can see that it's a feat that it got me to feel as much as it did, and it put me in the moods and mindsets of those characters. I can understand that that shows incredible writing skill, but I just really struggle to compartmentalize those things. And if something is really, really sad, I'm just gonna feel really sad while reading it, and that's obviously not enjoyable exactly. So that's definitely a personal taste issue. I think if you are someone who can just devour a sad book and that's not going to just kind of ruin your day, then you will probably really enjoy this. I would really recommend this author. I think their writing is incredible. The style was really profound at a lot of different moments. I think sometimes I understand why the choices are made, but sometimes when it comes to sad literary fiction, it gets to a point where I'm a little bit sick of it. Like, another sad thing will happen and I'll be like, oh, of course that had to happen. Of course this awful thing had to happen. No characters can be happy. That's not allowed. And it frustrates me. But again, I can tell that that's a me thing, you know? So I do want to say thank you for recommending this. I am glad that I read this. And it's still like high on my list for the year. I don't know exactly what I would rate it, but I can't deny that this is a very good book. It just isn't a personal favorite, I guess. But I do think that this is some of the most nuanced character writing that I've read this year. So I would definitely recommend it if that sounds like your kind of thing. Believe it or not, it is not even 4 p.m. It is so dark in the UK at the moment. But I still have a lot of reading to get done today. I would like to try to finish Starling House by the end of the day, if possible. I have a bit over 5 hours left of the audiobook. I can't remember where I left off with you guys, but I am still enjoying it. Things are coming to a head a little bit. The beginnings, the inklings of some kind of feeling between these two main characters is slowly developing. It's a very slow burn, which I'm happy about. So I am planning this afternoon to just dig into this moody, gloomy atmosphere of winter and finish this book. I am really enjoying the audiobook still. I think it's very well narrated. And I also have lots of crocheting to do. I am planning, as part of her Christmas present from Chris and I, to give Chris's sister a reading cover, like a book sleeve. So I went and got some yarn for that the other day, and hopefully I can do some crochet while I'm listening to Starling House. I think it's going to be a mostly cozy vibe with a little bit of spooky in there. There are moments of this narration style that I really enjoy. The snark that is used, especially when describing this kind of sentient house and its mannerisms, its kind of sassiness in the way that a door will slam of its own accord when it's grumpy, or there will be some kind of apologetic creak when it feels like it's done something wrong. I'm really enjoying that. I don't know if I'm quite as invested in the main character as I would like to be. I think there is time, I could be, but not yet. But I'm having fun. It is easy to get through, and I think I'm most interested to see how the relationship is going to develop between these two people, because it is still very much in its beginning stages. And also the main character's relationship with her brother. She has a younger brother who she is desperately trying to take care of and give a better life to, but this brother clearly feels like he needs some more independence to be able to make his own choices and take care of her every once in a while. So it's a very interesting relationship between the two, especially because she's now taken on this probably quite dangerous job in order to earn money to send him to a better school. Things are quite fraught between them. So those are my afternoon plans. I will either update you late tonight or sometime tomorrow morning with my thoughts on Starling House. Hello, it is the next day. I have finished Starling House. Wait, before I talk about it though, let me go and get my crochet to show you. Here we are. I have 5 out of the 6 squares that I need they're all a bit messy on the back. I need to go out today and get like a crochet needle. I used to have one, but I have no idea where it went so that I can properly sew my ends in. And then when I've made one more, the plan is you're going to stitch them together 2 by 3 and then sew the sides up so that it becomes kind of a pocket. I'm describing this awfully. I'll link the video tutorial that I'm using in case any of you are interested. But I love this colour scheme. The favourite colour brief I was given was dark green, yellow. I was given brown, but I didn't have any nice brown, so I went for a kind of warm green that I think links the yellow and dark green together. So I really hope she likes it. I might have to make one for myself when I'm done as well. But anyway, Starling House. I have mixed feelings. This was by no means a bad book. I can see what it was trying to do, and it did make some points. I went into it expecting just vibes, just atmosphere, and no real message, but it did have things to say about race and class and the way that societies just get so used to sweeping problems under the rug. Anything ugly, they don't like to look at it, so they just pretend that the problems aren't there. And I did really appreciate that this had that depth to it when I really wasn't expecting it when I went into this novel. But at the same time, it felt a little almost there. I went online after I was done to have a look at some other reviews, and I found a few people who said that it felt like almost a book they would love. Like, it had a lot of components that I really enjoyed, especially this sentient house. That was my favourite bit. But for some reason, most of it just didn't quite hit. I wasn't as attached to the characters as I wanted to be. The ending felt a little bit lackluster, and the writing would sometimes be really profound or funny or just lyrical in its description, but not consistently, I didn't think. I can understand why people really like this book, and there does seem to be a very mixed opinion between people who absolutely love it and people who feel like it fell a bit flat. It just wasn't quite there for me. And I think in terms of length as well, like when it comes to Six Deaths of the Saint, I felt like for that one, because it's so short, Alex E. Harrow wrote for that space so perfectly. There was no extra fat in there, but also it had so much to say in a short space of time. Whereas this one, I found myself getting a little bit bored at times, but at the same time, it didn't feel like it went in depth enough. I felt like some of this time in this book could have been used a lot more effectively. But if you like Gothic stories, and especially if you like stories that have those fantastical elements but really are quite rooted in the real world and its problems, then I would still recommend giving this one a go. I know a lot of people do love it, so give it a chance. I'm not sad that I read it. I think that 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow might be a better fit for me from what I've heard about it, but I think that of the two, Hello Beautiful is still my favourite book that I've read in this video. I wouldn't say that either of them are going to be personal favourites long term, but I am especially glad that I read this one because this was very out of my comfort zone and the writing was so good, even if it did devastate me. But thank you so much for your recommendations. Even though they didn't become personal favourites of mine, I'm still really glad that I got to reach out of my comfort zone a little bit. And that is one of the beautiful things about reading, and as a writer myself, I constantly need to remind myself that personal taste is so important and such a big factor in reading enjoyment. I would love to know, what is your favourite recommendation you've ever had? The book that has really spoken to you, that came out of nowhere because someone else recommended it to you. I would say mine is still The Illumination of Ursula Flight, because again, Chris's sister recommended this one to me. Hey, it kind of matches. Sorry. I digress. This was a book that was incredibly out of my comfort zone, and I had never really read historical fiction before, at least not as an adult and without fantasy involved, but I love this book so much. It's still one of my favourite books I read this year. So I think it's really important to read outside of your comfort zone and to listen to other perspectives. I would definitely like to do more videos of this kind of ilk in the future. If you'd like to be involved in that kind of thing and recommend me books in the future, then I would recommend giving my Instagram a follow, because that's where I tend to put those questions out. It's just the easiest place to sort through answers for things like this. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you are having the most wonderful day and festive season. If you celebrate, I hope your holidays are full of so much warmth and love and joy. There may be a good chunk of videos coming out in the next month or so. All of the cool, fun New Year's videos bring me so much excitement for the new year and nostalgia for the last one, and I cannot wait to make them all, so I'll probably be posting a little bit more regularly throughout this season. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video probably very soon. Bye bye.